This is the third video about my new Folding Woodworking Workstation. Today I will be showing you how to use and build the small assembly table, which you can use with a workstation or on its own. This folding workbench is designed for those who don't have a lot of space in their garage, or those who, like me, need to move it around and work outside of the workshop. Just like the router table in this project, by loosening two knobs I can move the assembly table back by about 15 centimeters. I've designed it this way for three reasons. Firstly, so that I can access the side of the table saw. Secondly, because this saw also has a lever on its side to attach and remove the riving knife. And thirdly, because those 15 centimeters will be useful as I will have a bigger work surface and can cut medium-sized work pieces more easily. Even though this isn't in the plans, I've screwed on a 9mm thick back part. It will help prevent the dust that's made when cutting with a table saw from going into the drawers. Installing this part is not indispensable. I've made two drawers that will slide along some grooves cut into the board itself, saving money and weight on drawer slides. In the top drawer, I put the wrenches that will let me change saw blades, as well as the zero clearance inserts I use most with this job site saw. I use the bottom drawer to store dovetail clamps and some wooden stops I'll use on the assembly table itself. This clamp system is very convenient and versatile. It allows me to hold pieces in all directions without the need to install T-tracks. The stops will come in handy to support wooden workpieces on the side top, and also to cut and plane their surfaces. I'll also be able to use the stops on the top table in a similar way. Another possible application of this assembly table is joining pieces together with screws. I've also made two jigs so I can place them at an angle on the table. Even though they're designed to be used with the table saw sled I'll make for this workbench, I'm sure they'll come in handy more than once when using this assembly table. I've designed this table so that I can continue using the table saw's fence. The outer modules of this folding workbench can be freely swapped, and I'll definitely end up making more modules so I can have more uses for this folding stand and get even more out of it. When I remove the assembly table from the workbench, I can use it anywhere else in the workshop. For example, on top of another medium-height stand. Like I did with the stops, I made some parts that will act as legs and spacer so that I can store the workbench in an upright position. To do this, ideally we should remove the drawers and fold in the legs of the workbench, as shown in previous videos. Its wheels and handles allow us to move it around the workshop in a convenient way. I should take it outside to see how it behaves on different kinds of terrain. Once folded, it can also be stored under another workbench. This is the 3D file included in the workbench plans for sale on my website. Here you can see the outfeed folding table I'm planning to use with this workbench. And this is the 3D model of the assembly table, which is also sold separately. Now I'll show you how to build the small assembly table. I'll start with the two sides. I'm going to mark the inner cuts and cut them just like I did with the router table, with the blunt saw and its rail. I'll finish the process with a jigsaw and a blade. I've installed the dado stack and the table saw, and I'll use it to cut all the required grooves to build the cabinet. First, I'll run some tests on a piece of a board. Here we can stop the groove or continue like I did. It's time to start working on the two tops of the cabinet. Since the dado stack is already installed in my table saw, I'll cut the required grooves under the tops. Before anything else, I'll run some tests to ensure the measurements on the folding stand are correct. Now I'll mark the channels that will allow me to use the dovetail clamps. I'll use the dado stack again to remove as much material as possible in order to make the job easier for the router bit. In my case, the table saw's fence dial will come in handy to make all the necessary cuts. Since the cuts are symmetrical, I can slowly turn the pieces to make channels on both sides. I'll use this folding workbench's router table to finish the job. First, I attach the dovetail router bit and adjust it to the correct height. I'm going to rotate the table saw fence. Now I only have to repeat the same steps as before, using the dial to find the exact position of the fence. The MDF makes a lot of dust when cut, so I'm using a dust hood to absorb as much dust as possible. It's time to cut both tops at an angle so I can glue them together into an L shape. Before applying glue, I'll run some tests. I'll use packing tape to join the tops while the glue is drying. Before moving on, I'll cut a rabbet so that I can later install the back of this cabinet. This time I'll use the table saw. As I was saying at the beginning of this video, this step is optional and is not included in the plans. After ensuring everything is correct, I apply wood glue and join both tops with the front and the back of the assembly table. I make sure the joint is square, but this shouldn't be a problem if all parts were cut correctly. It's time to make the two pieces that will allow me to attach the assembly table to the folding stand. I'm going to cut the grooves just like I did with the router table. First, I'll drill 2 holes so that I can insert the jigsaw. With a knife, I make some cuts to avoid tear out on the board. I'll finish the job with the router table. We can skip the router step and only use the jigsaw carefully. This step is also not included in the plans. To join these two pieces, I've decided to use some dowels to strengthen the bond to the side top. Now I'm going to machine the 4 pieces upon which the drawers will slide. I'll use the dado stack again to cut the required channel. It must be more or less 1 mm bigger than the thickness of the board we're going to use as the bottom of the drawers. I'm going to glue them in their emplacement, but I have to trim 2 of them so that I can install the back part of the table. Even though this isn't indispensable, I've placed 2 metal brackets to strengthen the bond between these parts and the side top. I've also cut the back part to size and now I'm going to screw it on. Before continuing, I'm going to cut grooves on the front of the table so that I can insert the drawers. I only have to do this on the front. The back will act as a stop for the drawers. I place the table on the folding stand, and now I realize I have to make some small rabbets with a file so that I can use the clamps on the top. I'm also going to use the 4 bolts that hold the table saw to the folding stand in order to level the saw with the 2 outer cabinets. I'm going to make the 2 drawers for this table. First, I'm going to cut the 2 bottoms to size. I have to make a little cut in the back of the bottoms in order to use the entire depth of the assembly table. Now I'll cut the rest of the drawer parts using poplar plywood to reduce the weight of this table. I drill some holes on the sides to use as a guide and put the drawers together. I'll use a simple jig I made a few years ago to finish assembling them in a quicker way. I'll use wood glue and screws. I attach the bottom to the box, and finally, as decoration, I'll glue on the front of the drawers a piece of the same board I used for the tops, but only 5 mm thick. Now all that's left is to make the stops to use with the assembly table. I'll use maple wood. First, I'll make some cuts with the table saw to make it easier for the dovetail router bit. Now I'll finish the job with the table router. I'm also going to make 2 jigs to place on the table at an angle. I've drilled some holes to insert the jigsaw and make the channels. Again, I finish this step with the router table. That's all for today. In a few days, I'll upload the next video in the series, where I'll be showing you how to make the folding outfeed table for this workbench.